want to ask you about your Republican opponent in the upcoming Arizona Senate election. He says Democrats want to, quote, change the demographics of the country. He has openly embraced Donald Trump's election lies. He has the support of a lot of openly racist, notorious individuals. The Arizona Republican nominee for governor says President Biden isn't a legitimate president. She says she wants her Democratic opponent in jail. The Republican nominee for Secretary of State in Arizona, he's a self-proclaimed member of the Oath Keepers.
Jake Tapper is setting up what I would argue is a layup for Democratic Senator Mark Kelly. Here are all these incredibly questionable, problematic figures within the Republican Party. What do you do about that? What are your feelings about that? How do you move forward? Of course, because cable news is obsessed with this, in a bipartisan manner. And Mark Kelly just can't stop himself from talking about his love affair with his political opponents. Let's take a look at the rest of that video.
You hold the seat once filled by John McCain, who was a conservative, but he did work across the aisle. He was very critical of voices like the ones I just mentioned, not them specifically, but that kind of what he would call Looney Tunes. What's happened to the Arizona Republican Party?
Well, unfortunately, I think right now that the folks you mentioned have some really dangerous ideas, and they're not consistent with most Arizonans, even most Republicans in Arizona. So, I'm hoping we can move away from that. My Republican colleagues that I talk to in the United States Senate, these are good people, by and large, who are working really hard, and they don't need those dangerous ideas in the United States Senate.
Republicans, really good people, including Republicans in the great state of Arizona that just gave Kari Lake a win in the Republican primary in this gubernatorial race. Kari Lake, a Trump lackey, someone who repeats lies about the election allegedly being stolen from Donald Trump. But no, Cenk, all of those questionable figures that were mentioned by Jake Tapper in the very beginning of that interview, or that clip, I should say. It's just a fringe. It's just a fringe element of the Republican Party. And honestly, I think that kind of thinking, especially by a member of the Democratic establishment, is so incredibly foolish, naive, and delusional.
Yeah, it's the attitude of a complete loser. But I'm gonna give you an excuse for Kelly in a second. If you're a Democratic apologist, don't get excited, it's gonna get worse. So first off, that was the biggest softball I've ever seen. And so if you can't hit that out of the park, you suck at this. Hey, your opponents are basically Beelzebub and Shaitan, right? And by the way, they kind of are, right? They're not kind of, they really, they're as bad as he is. His actual physical, literal opponent is Blake Masters. Blake Masters has praised the idea of not being a democracy. Look, we had Curtis Yarwin, who Blake Masters quotes regularly on The Conversation. It just aired today. Go check it out. We'll put the link down below to the long interview that I had with him. He says, yeah, I think a dictator is the right way to go. Now, whether you want to connect that to Blake Masters or not, you could read their quotes and see if that's, you feel comfortable or uncomfortable with that. But it's not like Jake Tapper is telling you that somebody's extreme when they're not extreme. And instead of going, goddamn right, you're right, Jake, Mark Kelly comes in and goes, my beloved Republican friends, I love them so much. I'd love to kiss their ass on national television. You're running against them, you knucklehead. Okay, so look, what's my excuse for Kelly? Like cops are taught cowardice, they don't come in as cowards. That would be ridiculous. They're just relatively random collection of people. And their training says, don't ever take any risks. Okay, and it's better that somebody else dies than you get a hangnail. And for Democratic politicians, the leadership teaches them how to be losers. So they bring in consultants and they go, now remember, when you're running against a Republican, you should tell the voters how great Republicans are. They're taught to be the dumbest, biggest losers in America by people like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden. These morons have been doing it for decades, and they lose very winnable races because of it. You see the quote, what he said? My Republican colleagues are, quote, good people working really hard. Why would you give them an ad when you're on TV? You're supposed to say vote for us, Democrats, not for the other guys. It's not that complicated. There's no way that Senator Kelly is that dumb. Someone has to teach you to be that dumb. So congrats, Democratic leadership.
I mean, I just think that this system inspires the type of statement that you heard from Kelly, because at the end of the day, I mean, are we really gonna pretend like the Republican Party was better prior to the Trump era? I mean, their bigotry and racism was certainly a little less explicit and overt. But at the end of the day, the policies that they were championing, what they wanted to do with this country, how they wanted to dwindle down what's left of our social safety net to essentially non-existence, all of that existed before Trump. Their willingness to strip women and members of the LGBTQ community of their rights still existed. Their willingness to start preemptive wars that lasted for decades existed prior to Donald Trump. Their unwillingness to do a damn thing about gun control in this country, which he should care about considering how it affected his family personally, that all still existed prior to Trump coming into office. So pretending like the Republican Party is just a unique brand of awful today, or only a certain portion of the Republican Party is a unique brand of awful today, I think is ridiculous. And again, delusional, but it's also true that these Republicans do serve, especially in the Senate, as a convenient excuse for Democrats being unable to do a damn thing when they're in power, right? Oh, what could we do? We needed 10 Republicans to vote along with us for this legislation. What could we do? What could we do? Well, did you fight for it? Did you do away with the legislative filibuster so you didn't need a single Republican? I mean, they love the convenient excuses. Final thing I'll say, you mentioned people like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. And you're right, Cenk, you're right about some of the lessons that we learn from people like Pelosi, for instance. And let me remind you of what Pelosi loves to say repeatedly.
I've also said that Republican Party, country needs a strong Republican Party. They've made great contributions to our country. I say this to Republicans all the time.
The country needs a strong Republican Party, not one that has been hijacked as a cult.
I think our country needs a strong Republican Party. It's very important.
Democrats love a strong Republican Party. It's very important. Now, to put it in fuller context, of course, Pelosi is trying to make the argument that we need a strong Republican Party that slaps down the Trump era of republicanism. But what she fails to understand is that the Trump brand is the Republican Party today. Okay, that's who they are. Trump gave them permission to be far more honest about who they are. And even before then, they were awful before then. Yeah. What great contributions? Where's the follow-up to that? What great contributions?
Anna, you know what we need? This country doesn't need a strong Republican Party. We have one that's already way over the top. No, we need a strong Democratic Party to fight against them.
Yes.
But instead, these losers come in there and kiss Republican ass when they're supposed to be the head of the Democratic Party. I am so sick of them going and say, oh, my Republican friends, I love them so much. Why don't you go make out in a corner, okay? Take it somewhere else. You guys are disgusting. You know, I mean, to your point, Anna, for God's sake, Mark Kelly's wife is Gabby Giffords. She was a Democratic congresswoman who was shot in the head. And by the way, your beloved Republican colleagues all voted, not the new ones, the extreme right wing. No, the ones you just praised. They all voted to make sure that there would be no consequences, that there would be no restrictions on gun control. So that could happen again and again and again. And yet you still kiss their ass. No, these Democrats, the establishment Democrats, are completely hopeless because they're corrupt. With Republicans, they totally agree on economic issues. But our press is a bunch of goddamn liars. And they won't ever say the thing that is obvious. Hey, wait a minute. You guys vote the same way on economic issues all the time. So yeah, maybe you might disagree on social issues, but isn't it true? And look at how they just fetishize bipartisanship. Isn't it true that you guys actually agree on corporate pork when it comes to every industry, infrastructure, semiconductors, tax cuts for corporations, on and on and on, and they all pass easily. But Tapper would never ask that, because Tapper loves it when they're bipartisan. And think about how stupid that is. You're in favor of bipartisanship, why? As a concept. Well, what if one side is a reasonable party and the other side is Nazis? Would you still be in favor of bipartisanship? Oh yeah, of course, bipartisanship is always good. No, it isn't. Use your brain for a half a second. No, that's why we're losing to Republicans, because these awful, corrupt morons are in charge of the Democratic Party and corporate media. And one last thing, to Anna's point, you idiot elitist. It's not just the extreme right wing that's such a tiny minority. No, it's the entire Republican Party. They just put Blake Masters as your opponent. He doesn't even believe in democracy. How stupid are you that you kiss their ass anyway and say, don't worry, Republicans are awesome, just a tiny little fringe group, don't worry. Why are you making excuses for them? Pathetic. Carrie Lake's in Arizona, and yet you still say Republicans are generally wonderful, but a tiny little exception for the extreme right wing. No, they're all voting for them, you morons. You're gonna get us all, you're gonna lose democracy on your watch. Exactly, idiot senators like that.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.